Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to another Mystery Monday. How are we all? Hope you guys all had the best weekend. If you're new here, welcome. We talk about true crime cases here on Mondays. So if that's something you're interested in, then please come and join us and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. So today we're going to be talking about a case that is currently going on in Australia. This is the case of the mushroom murders. And if you're in Australia, I'm certain that you've heard of this, but even around the world, I think this case has just been huge everywhere. It is one of the biggest cases in Australia in recent times. The verdict for the trial of this case actually just came out this month. At the time I'm filming this, it's July right now, and the verdict just came out at the start of this month. If you guys haven't heard of this case, basically in 2023, a woman named Erin Patterson had 4 guests over at her house in Leongatha in Victoria in Australia for lunch. Within 24 hours of this lunch, all 4 of her guests, Don and Gail Patterson and Heather and Ian Wilkinson, had become extremely ill. They believed it was food poisoning at first, but they all went to the hospital, and by the 5th of August, Don and Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson had tragically passed away. Ian was the only guest of Erin's at this lunch that miraculously survived. He spent weeks in the hospital fighting for his life before he was eventually released. As it turns out, the cause of their illness and the 3 deaths was poison by death cap mushrooms, which Erin Patterson had served to them in a beef Wellington. Now, before we do get into the case, I just quickly want to thank today's sponsor, NordVPN. You guys know I love NordVPN. I've been using them for years and years, and it is the one thing I recommend to all of my friends, family, strangers on the street. I recommend it to literally everybody because I genuinely use it every single day. Whether it's to access articles and documentaries on the cases that I research, whether it is to access shows and movies in the country I'm in. Like when I'm traveling, I use it to watch shows that aren't available in the country that I'm traveling to, or even just to keep the progress on the shows that I've been watching here in the UK when I travel. I use it to buy books on Kindle because, pro tip, I don't know about anywhere else, but if you're in the UK, Kindle books are actually cheaper on Kindle Australia than Kindle UK. And if there's a new release coming out, you can get it quicker in Australia as well because of the time difference. I also have my VPN on just all the time. When I'm out in public, if I have to get on public Wi-Fi terrifies me, or it used to terrify me, not anymore, because if you have NordVPN on, then you don't have to worry. It protects you from scammers, phishing links, malware, from fake shops. I mean, I could go on all day. It is truly the best, guys. So please make sure you check it out. They have a 30-day money-back guarantee. And also if you go to nordvpn.com/Belfiore, you can get a huge discount when you purchase a 2-year plan. Plus you'll get an extra 4 months free. So I will leave all of the information for that in the description box down below. Make sure you guys check it out, and let's go ahead and get into today's case. So Erin Patterson, born Erin Trudy Scudder, was born on the 30th of September 1974 to parents Heather and Eaton Scudder, and both of them were very respected in the community. Her mum Heather was a respected lecturer at Monash University. She taught and was considered an expert in children's literature, and she also wrote books, academic articles, and her father Eaton was a director for multiple Australian companies. They raised both Erin and her older sister in Glen Waverley, which is a suburb in Melbourne. Apparently, growing up, Erin really struggled with body image issues, low self-esteem, and eating disorders for her entire life, which she claimed was because her mum, from a young age, would weigh her and her sister every week to make sure they weren't gaining weight. Erin said, quote, "I've been fighting a never-ending battle of low self-esteem most of my adult life, and the further inroads I made it into being middle-aged, the less good I felt about myself." Despite how she felt about herself, though, many who knew her growing up described her as smart and witty, and just like their parents, both Erin and her sister were known to be very smart, very intelligent girls. Her sister actually went on to work as a scientist at Monash University, and Erin attended the same university pursuing science, though she left that course to study accounting. She also trained as an air traffic controller. It's actually a really difficult test that you have to take to become an air traffic controller, but she did pass, and she was one of the few to make it through the training program. The training program was pretty small. It was about 14 people, so everyone got pretty close except for Erin. Apparently she would never go out or would never go to anything that they invited her to, any social events or activities or anything like that. One of her classmates said, quote, "We always joked and supported each other, and she was never a part of that." She didn't really make any friends during the short time she actually worked as an air traffic controller for the Air Services Australia either. Her colleagues described her as abrupt, abrasive, odd, and a bit of a loner. One colleague described her as, quote, "a little bit strange," and another said, quote, "she was quite aggressive in the way she spoke to people." And they even, at her work, started referring to her as Crazy Erin and Scudder the Nutter behind her back. So she doesn't stick around for long. By 2004, she was working as an animal management employee for the RSPCA at Monash City Council. And that is where, in 2004, she met Simon Patterson. He was also working at the council as an engineer, and they were kind of seeing each other on lunch breaks, after work drinks, that sort of thing. And they just really hit it off, and they started dating, and they got married in 2007 at Simon's parents' home in Korumburra. And Korumburra is located in the South Gippsland area of Victoria, and it's about 120 kilometres or 75 miles southeast from Melbourne. By the time they got married, Erin was actually pretty well off. So her grandmother had died the previous year in 2006, and she had left Erin $2 million inheritance, which would be paid out starting in 2007 over an 8-year period. So they decide to quit their jobs and go and travel around Australia for a bit. When they get to Perth in Western Australia, Erin was able to use her inheritance to buy them a house outright, and it also allowed her to have the freedom to not work a full-time job. She instead decided to spend her time learning. She did some online university courses for law, for veterinary science, that sort of thing, and Simon worked at the local council. In 2009, Erin gave birth to her and Simon's first child, a son, and the birth of their son really helped Erin to bond with her in-laws. So her and Donald and Gail Patterson, Simon's parents, really started to get close. Erin had quite a traumatic birth with her son, and in the weeks following the birth, Don and Gail, they flew from Victoria to Perth just to be there for them, as new parents, to support them, and also, of course, to see their grandson. But they really started to get a lot closer during this time, and Erin said, quote, "I was really relieved that Gail was there because I felt really out of my depth. I had no idea what to do with a baby, and I was not confident, and she was really supportive, patient, and gentle with me." Simon said that Erin and Don, quote, "shared a love of knowledge and learning and an interest in the world, and I think she loved his gentle nature." And he also said that his parents were really active in maintaining a good relationship with Erin. Don and Gail had married in 1973 and had 4 children together. They settled in Korumburra in 1984, but before settling there, they had actually spent several years living and working in Botswana, where Don worked as a science teacher, and he even made a satellite dish out of chicken wire so that people in the remote community where they lived could watch TV. He was described by his son Simon as someone who, quote, "always loved chatting to strangers in his travels, particularly people of different faiths and cultures." Gail worked there teaching children how to read and write through a correspondence school, and they were described as kind and gentle people who operated as a team and worked together at life. After moving to Korumburra, they both worked as teachers at various different schools in the area until their retirement in the early 2000s. A former colleague of Don's said that he had inspired generations of students with his wacky methods as a science teacher, and said that he was a, quote, "caring mentor to staff young and old." Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson and her husband Ian Wilkinson also lived in Korumburra. They married in 1979 and had 4 children and 6 grandchildren together. They were really an inseparable team. They worked together at the Korumburra Baptist Church when Ian became a pastor there in 1999, which he has continued to do ever since. They were really considered to be pillars in the community. Korumburra was a small, quiet country town of about 4,500 people, and it was the kind of place where everybody knew their neighbor, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and they left their keys in the car. One article described the locals as fiercely loyal and said, quote, "It's the sort of place that you can be embraced very quickly and made to feel that you're a part of it." All 4 of them were a major part of the community. Heather and Ian spent their spare time volunteering to help others, and they also worked on community projects. Heather as well, just like her sister and brother-in-law, worked at local schools, and she and Gail had also been a part of a learning assistance program helping disadvantaged children. The manager of the program, a woman named Andrea, said, quote, "The way they worked with those children and what they were able to bring out of them was just phenomenal." Heather also spent time teaching migrant women, and the former principal of Corumburra Secondary College said, quote, "Heather loved her students and they had such fun together. Heather was all about caring for people and helping them." Andrea said that she believed it was their faith that led them to lead such selfless lives, and she said, quote, "I think that they believed that we all had a greater mission or purpose beyond ourselves. We had to just get out there and help others. We're in a fortunate position and we had to go out there and make things better for others." She also said, quote, "The world would be a better place if we could all be a bit more like them." They had actually influenced Erin's view on religion as well. She was an atheist and she had tried to convert Simon to atheism, but in doing so it kind of had the reverse effect where she ended up becoming a Christian. I think she did have a very difficult or up and down relationship with religion because she was an atheist for so long, tried to convert Simon because she was so atheist, and then Simon took her to a service in 2005 at Corumburra Baptist Church where Ian was the pastor. And she said that she had, quote, "what basically could be described as a spiritual experience." So some of her friends said that she had a complex relationship with religion. Ian and Heather had actually traveled the world as missionaries at a time, and Heather was described by neighbors as a warm and kind woman who would bake biscuits for her neighbors and would lend a helping hand whenever it was needed. One of her grandchildren said, quote, "Every Christmas she would give each cousin a stocking filled with goodies and treats. She was the kind of person to leave a permanent mark on your heart." And those that knew all four of them, Gail, Don, Heather, and Ian, said that they were all just generous and kind people. One local in the community said, quote, "You couldn't have met more gentle, giving, kind people. They were just lovely. They were funny. They were the nicest people." So in April 2009, Erin and Simon decide to pack their whole lives up into a four-wheel drive, and they're planning to just kind of drive around Australia, making stops around the way with their tent and just kind of camping out. After a couple of months, they make it to Townsville, which is about 4,500 kilometers or 2,700 miles away from Perth in Western Australia. So it's like on the complete opposite side almost of Australia. And Erin one day, she just up and leaves. She gets on a plane by herself, she flies from Townsville back to Perth, and she leaves Simon and her son in Townsville. And Simon said, quote, "I packed up everything and my son and I drove across Australia through the middle straight back to Perth." They actually separated for about 6 months at this time. So Erin and her son lived in a rental and Simon lived in a caravan nearby. They went through marriage counseling and after about 6 months, they got back together. But this is something that kind of became a pretty common occurrence in their marriage. They would break up and get back together. They would separate and they would reconcile. So it became quite rocky and, they were just constantly breaking up, getting back together over the years. After they reunited after the 6-month breakup, they moved around a little bit from York to Quinnip, which is where Erin opened a secondhand bookshop in nearby Pemberton in 2011. This is about 4.5 hours south of Perth. And then in 2013, they moved back to Corumburra in Victoria to be closer to Simon's parents ahead of the birth of their second child. And then in 2014, Erin gave birth to their daughter. During this time, Erin really became a lot closer to Simon's sister because they were actually pregnant at the same time and they gave birth to their babies just 3 days apart. So a lot of the family often referred to the babies as the twins. Then by late 2015, Erin and Simon actually separated for good. So they never officially divorced before this case happened, but they were separated. They had even a financial settlement where they both walked away with 50-50. They stayed on pretty good terms at the beginning of the separation. They even traveled together as a family to South Africa, Botswana, and New Zealand, like a bunch of family trips. Erin continued to go to family events with Simon's family and she said, quote, "It never changed. I was just their daughter-in-law and they continued to love me." Simon said, quote, "We really liked each other still. It was just the living together that didn't work." In 2019, Erin's mother actually passed away from cancer and her dad had actually passed away from cancer as well 8 years earlier in 2011. So following her mum's death, their beach home, her parents' beach home, it was a beachfront home in Eden. It was left to her and her sister, which they sold for $900,000 in 2019, and they split the profits of that. So she is doing still very, very well financially, and this money, along with her inheritance, allowed her to make smart financial decisions. She invested in property. It also allowed her and Simon to provide interest-free loans to Simon's 3 siblings and their partners so that they could purchase houses of their own. Erin also purchased a plot of land in Leongatha, which is about 15 minutes from Korumburra. She purchased it in both her and her estranged husband Simon's names, which Simon believes she did as kind of a gesture to show that she was still committed to their family and that she remained hopeful that they would get back together again, because like I said, they were constantly splitting up and getting back together, and so I think she was kind of hoping that they would end up back together again. In mid-2019, she also purchased another house in Mount Waverley, which is in southeast Melbourne, and that is a place where the family often went during school holidays. So she bought a house there, and once again she bought it in her and Simon's names. Meanwhile, on the Leongatha property, she designed her dream home there. I actually read that she designed it herself on Microsoft Paint. She said, quote, "I saw it as the final house, meaning I wanted it to be a house where the children would grow up, where once they moved away from uni or work, they could come back and stay whenever they liked, bring their children, and I'd grow old there." She moved into the 3-acre property in 2022. It had sprawling gardens, and she had sheep and goats and dogs, and she really became a bit of a recluse at this point. Those who lived in the area described her as an outsider with very few friends, and she was really considered an enigma in the area. She was rarely seen outside, and when she did, she just kind of kept her head down and didn't talk to anybody. And a lot of her socializing that she did was online. So in 2020, Melbourne lockdown era, when they were all going through those big lockdowns, she joined a bunch of these true crime Facebook groups, and she met friends that way, and she got really into these Facebook groups. She was actually known as the group's super sleuth, and she was known for having really good tech skills, really good research skills, and being able to dig up information on cases they were discussing. Her friends from these groups described her as a great mum. They said that her children were her greatest joy in life, and that, quote, her life appeared to revolve around them. They said that she just posted photos and videos of her children all the time. She really, really adored her kids, and they said that it seemed like her children were all she cared about in life. So as the years went on, it was reported that her and Simon's relationship really started to deteriorate, which also put a massive strain on her relationship with her in-laws, Don and Gail. In 2022, her and Simon's relationship took a turn for the worst, and things started to get pretty hostile. It's said that Simon filed a tax return, and he, for the first time, had listed himself as single on his tax return, which turned out to be just a mix-up with his accountant, but it really pissed Erin off. And it really, really changed their relationship and the dynamic of their relationship, which up until this point had mostly been pretty good. They had been on pretty good terms. So Erin told Simon that the change in relationship status on the tax return would affect the family tax benefit that they had. And so now she was going to have to be obliged to file for child support. She filed for child support through a federal government agency, and despite the fact that Simon, despite his assets, despite the fact that he had a good amount of money, despite the fact that he was also a civil engineer, so he was earning good money too, he was only ordered to pay $38 a month, and that's Australian dollars too, so that is really not a lot of money. The agency also told him basically not to pay anything outside of this until a financial agreement was reached as well. So basically to stop paying his children's school fees, their medical bills, to only pay his allocated $38 a month, which obviously really upset Erin. And so things were just getting more and more tense between them. It's reported that at one point their son needed a surgery, so Erin went to Simon, said, "Can you pay this or pay half, help me pay it?" And he said, "The Department of Human Services has told me I'm not allowed to pay anything outside my allocated monthly payments. I'm not allowed to pay for anything for you or for the children outside of that, so I can't do it." And, it was just really not a good situation. Erin tried to contact Don and Gail to get them to talk to Simon, to get them to mediate the situation, and they said that they didn't want to because they didn't want to get involved in their son's financial issues. So Erin sends this big ranting group text to the family group chat, and she basically says that Simon refusing to pay for these extra payments now is a punishment for her trying to claim child support, and that she would actually be entitled to over $30,000 of child support from like if she backdated it over the years. Erin wrote, quote, "Both parents have a duty to financially support the children they made. Simon is hiding behind the communication from the government, but now I've made a child support claim. He doesn't have to pay any bills outside of it. This is an instruction for people who want to be a bare minimum parent." She also starts complaining about the situation to her online friends, and she's telling them that Simon is a deadbeat, and she's telling them that Don and Gail are a lost cause. She wrote in a group chat to her online friends and said, quote, "I'm sick of this shit. I want nothing to do with them. I thought his parents would want him to do the right thing, but it seems their concern about not wanting to feel uncomfortable and not wanting to get involved in their son's personal matters are overriding that, so f*** them." In another message, she wrote, quote, "This family, I swear to f***ing God." And then to another online friend, she wrote, quote, "Why isn't she horrified her son is such a deadbeat that I had no choice but to claim?" At this point, it seemed like things were really up and down. So sometimes they would fight, sometimes things would cool down. At one time, Erin would say she hated everybody, and then the next minute she loved them all. The same year that she was sending these awful messages to her online friends about them, Gail sent her a message for Mother's Day, and Erin responded to her and said, quote, "Thanks, Gail. Happy Mother's Day to the best mum-in-law anyone could ask for." So very chipper in comparison to, she goes from sending her online friends messages saying, "Fuck them all, they're a lost cause," to sending Gail a message saying, "You're the best mother-in-law ever." There was also some tension in October 2022 when Erin believed that she got a last-minute invite to Gail's 70th birthday lunch, and she was really upset about it. Simon texts her the day before the birthday lunch and asks her if she's coming, and she says, "Well, I didn't even know about it." And Simon says, "Well, I thought Dad was inviting you. Things just must have got mixed up." So Erin responds to Simon on text, and she says, quote, "I'm not too sure how your dad could have been confused. Seems that my invite tomorrow is a bit of an afterthought and not even from your parents. So I might pass, thanks, as I'd rather not go somewhere I'm not welcome." Then she sends him another text a bit later on, and she says, quote, "What I reckon is everyone actually forgot to invite me to this thing, and I feel very, very hurt about that." They get into a bit of an argument about the whole thing. I think at one point, Simon allegedly might have called her ridiculous, and then she obviously got very upset by that, and there was a bit of back and forth before eventually he says, "Look, I get it. I do understand why you're upset, but it's a really important lunch to Mum, and Mum and Dad would really love to have you there." And so she relents and she says, "Okay, I will come and I'll bring the kids." And they kind of apologize to each other, make up, and cool things down. It was really just a big misunderstanding, but it just shows how things got heated between them very quickly. And Don and Gail also, apparently, they were so stressed through this whole thing. They felt so awful because they thought that they had invited her. And they were so stressed out and so upset that she was so upset about thinking she wasn't invited. But there really was just a lot of ups and downs like this in the relationship. There was a lot of tension between Simon and the in-laws, and it was mostly seemed to be coming from Erin's side. So on the 16th of July, 2023, Erin attends the Corumburra Baptist Church where Ian is the pastor. And while she's there, she invites him, his wife Heather, and Don and Gail to have lunch at her house in Leongatha on the 29th of July, 2023. And she wants to talk to them about some medical issues at this lunch. They all say, "Amazing, we'd love to." They're all very happy to be invited, and they're all very happy to go to the lunch. She also invited her estranged husband Simon to the lunch, but the day before the lunch, on the 28th of July, he sends Erin a text and he basically says, "I'm not going to come because I just feel too uncomfortable about it." And she is very upset by this. She sends him a text in response within 5 minutes of his text to cancel, and she says, "That's really disappointing. I've spent many hours this week preparing lunch for tomorrow, which has been exhausting in light of the issues I'm facing. And I've spent a small fortune on beef eye fillet to make beef Wellingtons because I wanted it to be a special meal, as I may not be able to host a lunch like this again for some time. It's important to me that you're all there tomorrow and that I have the conversations that I need to have. I hope you'll change your mind. Your parents and Heather and Ian are coming at 12:30. I hope to see you there." Simon didn't reply to this message. He didn't show up to the lunch. He did tell his parents that he wasn't going to be going as well, so they knew that he wasn't going to be there. And then on the 29th of July, 2023, the lunch still went ahead with Gail, Don, Heather, and Ian. Erin and Simon's children, their 9-year-old daughter and their 14-year-old son, also weren't at the lunch because Erin dropped them at the movies shortly before all of her guests arrived. So when everyone arrives, Gail brought an orange cake with her, Heather brought a fruit platter. They all get to chatting. Heather and Ian had never been to Erin's house, so Erin gives them a little bit of the tour of the house, tour of the gardens. Heather is redoing her pantry, so she's really interested in seeing Erin's pantry at the house, but Erin was kind of reluctant to show the pantry. It was kind of a weird situation, not overly crazy or anything, nobody noticed anything, but she was just a little bit reluctant to give them a full pantry tour. And of course, Heather and Gail also, they offered to help Erin out. They offered to help her in the kitchen, help her serve, and Erin insists, please no, you guys go out and sit there and I will serve everything up and I will bring it out. And so they go and sit down, they wait for their food. Erin had spent basically all day that day preparing individual beef Wellingtons for everybody with a side of mashed potatoes and green beans. And it is, definitely kind of strange because a beef Wellington, it's normally served family style. You make one big beef Wellington and cut slices from it. But she made everybody an individual beef Wellington. They all eat, they are chatting over lunch, and then after they finish eating, Erin tells them that the reason that she's gathered them all there for this lunch is because she wanted to tell them that she had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer and she believed that it was quite serious. She told them that she hadn't told her kids yet and she was really anxious about telling them and how to tell them, and she told everybody at the lunch that she was going to be needing treatment for it pretty soon. And so they all joined hands and they all prayed for her. And then eventually, they ate the cake, they ate the fruit platter, and eventually they all went home. By midnight that night, Don, Gail, Ian, and Heather had all become incredibly unwell. And they're thinking, maybe it's gastro, maybe they had eaten something funny and gotten a bout of food poisoning. But by the next morning, it had gotten so bad that Don at 8:30 a.m. on the 30th of July had actually called an ambulance to take him and Gail to hospital. Heather called Don that morning to see how they were doing because obviously Heather and Ian were also feeling extremely unwell. And so she called Don to see how they were feeling, if they were having any similar symptoms. And Don said, yes, in fact, we've called an ambulance to take us to the hospital. Don also called his son Simon at around 8:45 a.m. that morning just to let him know what was going on. They were very unwell, they were going to the hospital, and that Heather and Ian were also experiencing similar symptoms. The ambulance arrived at their house at 9:15 a.m. that morning. It took them straight to Corumburra Hospital, where they were immediately treated for gastroenteritis. After getting off the phone with his dad, Simon immediately tries to call Heather and Ian and see what's going on, see how they're feeling, but they don't answer. So he makes the decision to drive to their house. And when he gets there, they are very, very unwell. Simon said that Heather was lying on the floor in the lounge room next to a bucket and that both of them were just exhausted and they were worn out from how sick they had been. While Erin was out of the room at one point, Heather makes a comment to Simon basically saying that Erin had served them on different plates. So Gail, Heather, Ian, and Don had all been served on larger grey plates, but Erin had served herself on a smaller tan or orange coloured plate. And this was an observation that Heather made that she mentioned to Simon in the moment and just thought was maybe a little strange. Simon calls 000 and he's told that it's going to be an hour wait for an ambulance. So he drives Heather and Ian himself straight to Leongatha Hospital because he was told that Corumburra Hospital was full, that they had no beds. On the drive to Leongatha Hospital, Heather brings up the plates again and she says, quote, "Is Erin short of crockery? I was wondering why she served herself on a different plate to the rest of us. I've puzzled about it since lunch." They arrive at the hospital at around 11 a.m. that morning. They are assessed by a triage nurse and they're immediately sent to an isolated room for treatment. Simon then drives to Corumburra Hospital, arriving at around 12:15 p.m. to check on his parents and see how his parents are doing. They had been, by this point, given anti-nausea medication and they were on an IV drip, and Simon said they were in really, really bad shape. He said, quote, "Dad was substantially worse than Mum. He was really struggling. He was lying on his side. He was hunched quite noticeably. His voice was stranged in a way that he wasn't right inside. He was feeling pain." By that afternoon, the blood test results came back and they showed extremely abnormal results and they also showed signs of liver failure. And so by 5 p.m. on the day after the lunch, so just on the 30th of July, doctors at Corumburra Hospital made the decision to immediately transfer both Don and Gail to Dandenong Hospital, which is in southeast Melbourne. It's a bigger hospital with more advanced technology, and it also has specialist care facilities to deal with critical care and organ failure management. The same day, so 30th of July, Erin also claims that she's starting to feel unwell, she's feeling nauseous, and she's just kind of got constant diarrhea. Despite this, she spends the day running errands, so she drives a 180 kilometer or around 111 mile round trip to drive her son to a flying lesson in the Mornington Peninsula. On the way to the lesson, it gets cancelled, so she turns around. All in all, she drives about 2 hours there and back. On the way back, she stops at a servo, or a service station, gas station. She stops there, she goes inside, she goes into the bathroom for 9 seconds, seen on CCTV. Very quick little diarrhea session. 9 seconds. I don't even think I can wash my hands in 9 seconds. Then on the way out, she buys some sandwiches and some lollies from the servo before continuing on home. Mind you as well, in the CCTV footage, she is wearing white pants. And I don't know about you, but if I had gastro, if I had constant diarrhea, I do not think I would wear white pants. And I don't think I would be driving 2 hours, to be honest with you. I think I would be like, you know what? I can't take you to the flying lesson because I am pooping. I'm pooping a lot. Then that afternoon when she gets home, she feeds her children the leftover beef Wellington and she scrapes off the mushrooms for them because apparently they don't like mushrooms. On the 31st of July, so the next day, 2 days after the lunch has taken place, Dandenong Hospital, where Don and Gail are being treated, get in contact with Leongatha Hospital, where Ian and Heather are being treated. And they say that they've run some tests and they suspect toxic mushroom poisoning. So at this point, the decision is made to, at some point very soon, transfer all 4 of the patients to Austin Hospital, which is also in Melbourne, for specialist liver care. That morning, so we're still on the 31st of July, Erin drops her kids off at school and then she contacts Simon and says, "Can you please take me into the hospital? I'm really not feeling well." And Simon tells her basically no, that she's going to have to find another way to get there. So at 8 a.m, she takes herself to Leongatha Hospital and she tells them that she's experiencing nausea, abdominal cramps, and she's needing to go to the toilet every 20 minutes. When she gets into the hospital, obviously she gives them her name and the doctor immediately recognizes her as the person that cooked the meal who made 4 people extremely sick. And so he says to her, you know, you need to be admitted because everybody's really sick. We suspect that it's toxic mushroom poisoning, so we need to treat you immediately. Her response to being told that she has likely consumed deadly mushrooms is to say Woolworths, which if you're not from Australia, you might not know. Woolworths is one of our biggest supermarkets that we have in Australia, a grocery store. So the doctor, his name is Dr. Chris Webber, and immediately he finds this weird because if she had said something like, "Oh my goodness, I found these mushrooms in my backyard," or "I foraged these mushrooms, I can't believe it," he probably wouldn't have thought that much about it, or he wouldn't have thought it was suspicious. But blaming one of the biggest, if not the biggest supermarket in Australia, who have very strict food, health, and safety standards, it just stuck out to him as strange immediately. Erin also declines to undergo a full examination. She also refuses to be admitted, and she actually leaves the hospital. She's been there all of 5 minutes. She's told she might have ingested death cap mushrooms, and she just leaves. Dr. Webber tried to call her. He left a voicemail for her. She didn't answer. She never called him back, and so he actually decided to contact the police.
This is Dr. Chris Webster calling from Leongatha Hospital. And I have a concern regarding a patient that presented here earlier but has left the building and is potentially exposed to a fatal toxin from mushroom poisoning. And I've tried several times to get hold of her on her mobile phone.
So, before I get all that information in, what address do you need the police to attend, Dr. Chris?
Yeah, so, well, should I give the hospital address or the address of the patient?
If you know where they are, their address.
I have the address of the patient.
Yeah, go ahead with that.
Okay.
Is that in Leongatha?
Leongatha 3953.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, nearest intersection is that correct?
I'd have to get Google Maps up, but yes, I would say that sounds right. That sounds like a street in Leongatha. Yeah.
What's her name?
So the last name is Patterson, Patterson.
First name?
Erin, Erin.
Do you have a date of birth?
30th of September, 1974.
When did she present at hospital?
At 8:05.
Today?
Yeah.
Mushroom poisoning, you said?
Yeah, so there were 5 people that ate a meal on Saturday, and 2 of them are in intensive care at Dandenong Hospital. 2 have just been transferred from Leongatha Hospital to Dandenong Hospital, and Erin presented this morning with symptoms of poisoning.
Bear with me. And what happened when she presented? She just got up and left?
No, there was time for the nurse to begin observations, and I was managing the other critically unwell patient, so I had a brief chat to her about where the mushrooms were obtained, and after that, while I was attending the other patients, the nurse informed me that she had discharged herself against medical advice.
Before the police can even contact her or reach her house, she comes back into the hospital at 9:48 a.m. And this time she comes in, she accepts that she's going to do some testing. And they also tell her that she should bring her children in. They really urge her to bring them in because she had told them that she had fed her children the leftovers. And she basically she's very reluctant to bring her children in for testing, and she says it's fine, I scraped all of the mushrooms off them, they're fine. That afternoon she was transferred to Monash Medical Centre, and she did have Simon meet her there with the kids so that her kids could also undergo observation, but they were all fine. They were all tested, none of them were exposed to death cap mushrooms. All of their tests were normal. As a result of hearing about the leftovers though, a police officer was dispatched to her home in Leongatha to retrieve the leftover beef Wellington from the bin, and that was sent off for testing. By that night, both Don and Gail had arrived at Austin Hospital. They were both now critically ill and in multiple organ failure. Gail was intubated and Don was in an induced coma with life support ventilation. The next day, on the 1st of August, both Ian and Heather also arrived at Austin Hospital. Heather was critically ill in multiple organ failure and she was also intubated. Ian had acute liver failure and he was being intubated and he was also on mechanical ventilation. By that same afternoon, so still the 1st of August, Erin is discharged from Monash Medical Centre where all of her tests allegedly came back saying that she was fine. So now she's interviewed by the Department of Health and she tells them that she bought a packet of dried mushrooms with a handwritten label on it from the Asian grocer, which is problematic in and of itself. She's come in the day before, allegedly claiming it's Woolies, goes home for an hour and a half, comes back, and her story's changed to say that she's now purchased dried mushrooms from an Asian grocer. And also adding on that the label is handwritten. I don't know if it's a thing of Woolies was too easy to trace. Maybe an Asian grocer is more believable, maybe harder to trace. Why on earth would an Asian grocer be selling death cap mushrooms in a handwritten label? I'm sorry. Not to mention she's saying she doesn't even know which Asian grocer it was. She's just saying it was in Southeast Melbourne. She gave them 4 different potential locations around Clayton, Mount Waverley, Glen Waverley, that sort of area. Doesn't even know the area, just somewhere in Southeast Melbourne, which mind you is an hour and a half away from her home in Leongatha. It's 115 kilometers or over 70 miles away from her home. During this interview, she also says that she's never foraged for mushrooms and that she doesn't own a dehydrator because they found that the mushrooms, the death cap mushrooms, were dried. So the next day, on the 2nd of August, the Monash Council goes out to Southeast Melbourne and they start looking in all of the Asian grocer stores in the area to try and locate something matching Erin's description. Dried mushrooms, handwritten label, in a plastic bag, which of course they don't locate anything of the sort. And then by the 3rd of August, the police launch an official investigation. The next day, on the 4th of August, 66-year-old Heather Wilkinson died in Austin Hospital at 2:50 a.m. At 5:55 p.m. that night, Gail Patterson also dies in Austin Hospital. Don was getting worse and worse, and so that day they gave him a liver transplant. That same afternoon, so the 4th of August, police actually locate a Sunbeam dehydrator at the Coonawarra tip, or the landfill there. And there's actually CCTV footage of Erin dumping items at this landfill 2 days earlier. So on the 5th of August, police execute a search warrant at her house where they find a manual for a Sunbeam dehydrator. They recover a Recipe Tin Eats cookbook with a beef Wellington instructions. And they also seize computers, tablets, and one of Erin's phones. And that afternoon, they take her into the station to be interviewed. That night at 11:30 p.m. on the 5th of August, 70-year-old Don Patterson also dies in Austin Hospital. Ian Wilkinson is now the only guest of Erin's lunch that is still alive, and at this point, he is in the hospital, still fighting for his life. The next day, on the 6th of August, Erin allegedly tries to remotely factory reset her phone that was seized by police, that police was still in possession of. And it's reported and it's alleged that she continued to use another phone that she had already been using that police didn't find in their search, and they have never recovered. This day as well is the day that A Current Affair interviews her outside her home in Leongatha. And if you guys have heard about this case, if you've been following about this case, then you probably know this interview. It's the only interview she's done. And she's at the front of her house, she's fake crying, she's wiping away imaginary tears that aren't there. It's actually a really hard watch because she is such a terrible actress. She says, "I loved them all. It's so awful what's happened to them. You know, they never did anything wrong to me," which at no point did the interviewer ever ask her if they had done anything wrong to her.
It's a tragedy what's happened.
Can you tell us about the meal that you cooked?
I'm so devastated by what's happened, by the loss of Don. Don is still in hospital, the loss of Ian and Heather and Gail, who were some of the best people that I've ever met. Gail was like...
Take your time.
Gail was the mum that I didn't have because my mum passed away 4 years ago. And Gail's never been anything but good and kind to me. And Ian and Heather were some of the best people I've ever met. They never did anything wrong to me, and I'm so devastated about what's happened.
Can you tell us
and the loss to the community and to the families and to my own children who've lost their grandmother.
Can you tell us a bit more about the lunch?
What I can tell you is that I just can't fathom what has happened. I just can't fathom what has happened. That Ian and Heather have lost their lives, and Gail has lost her life, and Donna's still in hospital, and I pray that he pulls through, because my children love him.
And you must be pretty shaken up by this as well.
I'm devastated. I love them. And I can't believe that this has happened, and I'm so sorry that they have lost their lives.
How are you
And I
kids?
just can't believe it. Just can't believe it.
Can you tell us where the mushrooms came from? Were they picked from the property area?
I just ask you to leave me alone now, please.
Police say you're a suspect. Do you have anything to say about
Yes,
that?
I say I didn't do anything. I love them. And I'm devastated that they're gone. And I hope with every fibre of my being that Don pulls through. That's
Where
what I
do the
have to
mushrooms
say.
come from? Were they picked by you, or where did they come from, Erin? Can you tell us? What meal did you cook them? Did you eat the same meal, Erin?
By the 11th of August, the Department of Health concluded their investigation after being unable to find any death cap mushrooms in any grocery stores or any mushrooms matching Erin's description. 1 month later, on the 11th of September, Ian Wilkinson is miraculously discharged and he has moved into a rehabilitation ward. And he is the only guest from this lunch that survived. A few weeks after that, on the 2nd of November, Erin Patterson is arrested and she is officially charged with 3 counts of murder for the murders of Don and Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson, and 5 counts of attempted murder relating to Ian Wilkinson and Simon Patterson. Eventually, the charges for the attempted murder of Simon Patterson are dropped and her trial began on the 29th of April 2025, so just a few months ago, and it lasts 9 weeks. She was being tried for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, to which she pled not guilty. So let's talk about the trial. Let's talk about all of the evidence that was presented. First of all, the prosecution presented evidence to show, and Erin herself also admitted, that she picked up foraging as a hobby during the COVID-19 lockdowns in Victoria in 2020 and 2021. The prosecution alleged that she used a website called iNaturalist.org, it's a website where people can go and share the plants, animals, and fungi that they find and where they found it. The prosecution presented evidence that on the 18th of April 2023, so just 3 months before the fatal lunch, a post is made on this iNaturalist website saying that some death cap mushrooms have been found in an area called Loch, which is just 24 minutes from Erin's home in Leongatha. A telecommunications expert testified that 10 days later, on the 28th of April, that Erin's phone indicated a possible visit to that area. On that same day, so the 28th of April, Erin also purchased a Sunbeam dehydrator from an electrical store in Leongatha. Then a month later, so 21st of May 2023, another post on iNaturalist indicates that death cap mushrooms are growing in the area of Outram. The prosecution alleges that the next day, on the 22nd of May, Erin's phone records suggested that she travelled to both Outram and Loch. And then also on the topic of phone records, as I mentioned, when police executed a search warrant of her home, they seized one of her phones. However, it's alleged by the prosecution that she actually had 2 phones and 2 SIM cards. And the phone that she used was never recovered. Not to mention the phone that was seized by police was allegedly factory reset remotely the day after they seized it. And allegedly, she also attempted to factory reset it 3 times in total. Now, the dehydrator that she had purchased in April was recovered from Coonwarra landfill on the 4th of August, and she was seen on CCTV dumping it at Coonwarra landfill just days earlier. Initially, when she was interviewed by police back on the 1st of August in 2023, she lied to them and she said that she had never purchased or owned a dehydrator. Her Facebook friends, however, shared messages with the police where she had told them that she was dehydrating mushrooms so that she could hide them in all of her kids' food, and she even sent them photos of mushrooms in the dehydrator. When the police executed a search warrant of her home, like I said, they found a manual for a Sunbeam dehydrator. And so they confronted her with this information. She admitted that she had lied about it. She admitted that she had dumped the dehydrator in the landfill. And she said that the reason she did this is because when she heard the topic of death cap mushrooms and poison mushrooms being brought up, she panicked and she was really scared to lose custody of her children. Her dehydrator was tested, and a forensic expert testified during the trial that they did in fact find traces of death cap mushroom residue in the trays. Erin also claimed that she had purchased a packet of dried mushrooms that were packaged in a plastic bag. They had a handwritten label, and she had purchased it from an Asian grocer in southeast Melbourne. Again, she said she didn't know which one. It could have been in Clayton, could have been in Oakley, could have been in Glen Waverley, could have been in Mount Waverley. The police, the Department of Health, never found anything at any Asian-style grocery store in southeast Melbourne selling death cap mushrooms, selling dried mushrooms in a plastic bag with a handwritten label. They didn't find anything matching Erin's description. Because why would an Asian grocer be selling death cap mushrooms? As if Asian grocers aren't also regulated and have health and safety food standards. I mean, Erin also claimed that she must have mixed up her foraged mushrooms and the mushrooms she purchased from the Asian grocer and accidentally used the ones from the Asian grocer in the beef Wellington. The prosecution argued during the trial that she'd basically fabricated this whole story of finding these mushrooms at an Asian grocer, purchasing them there, and she'd basically sent them on this big wild goose chase. And she did it to cover it up and to mislead authorities, and she, of course, denied that claim. And speaking of fabricating lies, it came out during the trial that she allegedly also lied to all of her guests about having ovarian cancer because, as it turns out, she was never diagnosed with any form of cancer. She denied that she even told them that she had been diagnosed with cancer, but admitted that she might have told them she would need cancer treatment in the future. And she claimed that she did this because she was planning on having a gastric bypass surgery because, as I mentioned earlier, she had body issues and self-esteem issues for her entire life. And so she was planning on getting this gastric bypass surgery, but she was too embarrassed to tell anybody about it. And so she wanted to have an excuse of why she needed to go through this recovery period afterwards. Ian Wilkinson, though, the only surviving guest of her lunch, testified at the trial and said, quote, "She plainly said she had some sort of cancer. Erin was fairly clear the diagnosis was given." So back to the mushrooms, Erin, during the trial, claims that she, at the time, had no idea what a death cap mushroom was. She said that the whole thing was an accident and that she had no idea she was serving anybody death cap mushrooms. However, prosecutors presented evidence that allegedly showed that she had been Googling death cap mushrooms, There was also the iNaturalist activity that we spoke about earlier. Ian Wilkinson also testified about the fact that she didn't let anybody help her serve or plate up the food, and she also served herself on a different plate to everybody else. So everybody was served on a larger grey plate, and she served herself on a smaller red or orange tan coloured plate. Erin, however, claimed that she served everybody on a variety of plates that were red, white, and black. In maintaining that the mushroom poisoning was an accident, Erin also claimed that she had fallen ill following the lunch as well. So on the 30th of July, the day after the lunch, she said, as I mentioned, that she was feeling nauseous and that she had diarrhea. But then she drove her son 2-hour round trip to a flying lesson that was cancelled, wearing white pants, mind you. On the drive back from the cancelled flying lesson, she claims that she stopped on the side of the road because she really needed to release her bowels. Then when she stopped at the service station, the gas station, later on that drive, she claims that the reason she was in the bathroom for 9 seconds is because she was disposing of the napkins that she had used to clean herself up. The prosecution alleges that her son never made any mention of her stopping on the way home to take a dump on the side of the road. And they said, that is definitely something he would remember, so he would have mentioned it. They also argued that, quote, if she really did have diarrhea in the bush, it would take more than 9 seconds of cleaning herself up or at a minimum to wash her hands. They also rejected any suggestions that Erin or her children suffered even a mild version of death cap mushroom poisoning, and they presented the test that they took when she was at and her children were at Monash Medical Center, which showed that neither Erin nor her children showed any signs of amatoxin poisoning, which is death cap mushroom poisoning. And also, with this hospital visit, right? So she goes to the hospital, morning of the 30th of July, day after the lunch. They tell her, all 4 of your guests have been poisoned by death cap mushrooms, so you probably have as well if you ate the same meal. And she says, well, I'm gonna go home. She goes home, allegedly lies down for 90 minutes before going back to the hospital. The prosecutor asked, quote, after being told you had potentially ingested a life-threatening poison, isn't that the last thing you'd do? Because if the hospital tells you that all of your guests have ingested death cap mushroom in this meal that you made for yourself and for everybody else, so you've probably ingested it as well, would you not be freaking out? Would you not want to go and get that treated as soon as possible because it is a fatal toxin? Would you not say, okay, get me in there right away? Also, I fed this to my kids last night. I fed them the leftovers, even though I brushed the mushrooms off. What if there's traces on there? Let's get my kids in here. Let's sort this. Let's get ahead of this. But no. She went home and allegedly just laid down for 90 minutes. And the prosecution claims that she did this because she needed time to come up with her story. Maybe she didn't realize it was going to be so easy to find out that they had been poisoned with death cap mushrooms, and she needed to go home and make up a lie about how these mushrooms could have ended up in the food that she cooked. Erin claimed that she had been so caught off guard that she just needed to go home, she needed to lie down, she needed to feed her dogs, pack a bag, because she was just feeling so overwhelmed. Also, the prosecution and her estranged husband, Simon Patterson, alleged that she never asked how Don, Gail, Ian, or Heather were, or how sick they were. Both of Erin's children told the police that they had eaten leftovers of that beef Wellington on the 29th of July, so the day that the lunch took place. They had leftovers later that night. Allegedly, neither of them recalled being told not to eat the food or that the food was dangerous, and neither of them mentioned anything about the mushrooms being scraped off. For this reason, the prosecution suggested that Erin cooked herself and served herself and her children a different portion than she served the rest of the guests. Her children also allegedly told the police that they didn't know their mum to forage for mushrooms, and in fact, nobody in Erin's life mentioned that she had gotten into foraging at all, or they didn't know her to forage. Now, during this trial, no specific motive was ever presented, but the prosecution did take the jury through what they alleged was growing anger and resentment from Erin towards Simon and her in-laws. They spoke about Simon's tax return that listed him as single and led to a bunch of disputes between them about child support. They also spoke about Erin's frustration towards her in-laws for their reluctance to get involved. I'm honestly not sure where Heather and Ian come into this. The prosecution alleged that maybe it was just their closeness to Simon and maybe she just wanted to hurt Simon's side of the family. I'm really not sure why they come into it, and yeah, there was no specific motive that was ever presented at the trial. So the trial ended on the 1st of July in 2025, and the jury deliberated for 6.5 days before reaching their verdict. on the 7th of July 2025, Erin Patterson was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Because this is so recent, I'm filming this still in July, she hasn't been sentenced yet, so I will definitely keep you guys updated on that, and if she attempts to make any appeals, which hopefully she doesn't. Also, at the time of filming this, I thought I would just mention, but just yesterday, the Daily Mail, which I don't know how reputable the Daily Mail is, but I just thought I would mention it. The Daily Mail came out with an article alleging that doctors found her to have Munchausen syndrome. And if you're not familiar with Munchausen's, it's basically a psychological disorder where somebody either pretends to be sick or they actually do things to themselves and take things to make themselves appear sick so that people will care about them and make them the center of attention. They say in this article, quote, "The condition could potentially save Patterson from being jailed for life if it's cited as a mitigating factor for the murders, although that outcome is unlikely." So I will definitely keep you guys updated on that. I'll keep you updated on the sentencing, if she appeals, all of that kind of stuff. A memorial was held for Don and Gail Patterson on the 31st of August in 2023 at the Corumburra Recreation Centre, which over 350 people attended. Their son Simon spoke at the memorial and said, quote, "It was no fluke that Mum's final text message on our family group chat as she lay in Dandenong Hospital was, 'Lots of love to you all.'" He went on to say, "As Mum and Dad lay in comas in the hospital in their final days, and each day we were unsure if they would recover or not, it was comforting to know that when we said 'see you later,' we knew that it was true. The only thing we don't know was when. In the meantime, we'll miss them." Heather Wilkinson's memorial was held weeks later so that her husband, Ian Wilkinson, could attend. It was held on the 4th of October 2023 at the Corumburra Recreation Centre, where the town came together to celebrate her and pay their respects. At the service, her son David said, quote, "Mum considered motherhood to be a wonderful gift. She loved to laugh and have fun. She loved being a mum and she loved us. She was uncompromising but full of grace, thoughtful, faithful, and welcoming to visitors." And on the 20th of July this year, so 2025, Ian Wilkinson made his return to the Corumburra Baptist Church for the first time since Erin's guilty verdict. He spoke briefly introducing himself and quoted Psalm 23:4. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. My name is Ian and I used to lead services here a lot, and I'm pleased to be back with you again." And that is everything for this case for the moment. So I'll definitely make sure to keep you guys updated on sentencing, if there are any appeals, anything about that Munchausen's. I mean, the Daily Mail really isn't that reliable, but it just came out yesterday. So I don't know. I'll definitely make sure to keep you updated on anything that comes out about the case. But it is truly it's just such a tragic case. I mean, her children were just 9 and 14 years old. They've lost both their grandparents. They have lost their mother, really. Simon lost both of his parents. Ian lost his wife and his family, and he had to go through weeks and weeks fighting for his life. And of course, Don and Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson lost their lives. It is just tragic beyond words, this case. But that's all from me today, guys. That's all for today's video. I will, like I said, I'll keep you updated. I'll be in the comments to chat to you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.